On a Tuesday morning just south of Orlando in Kissimmee, Florida, these canvassers are registering voters outside the Unidos supermarket on behalf of Mi Familia Vota, or My Family Votes, a civic engagement organization focused on increasing Latino political power in the United States. Jamie Ramirez has been working to educate her fellow Latino voters since moving to the city from Puerto Rico 4 years ago.
Here,
you can vote on election day, or you can do early vote, which is like 7 or 10 days before the election. You can mail in your vote, many ways to participate.
Latinos account for half of Florida's population growth since 2010 and are 1/4 of the state's 20 million residents. The fastest Latino growth has occurred in the counties along the I-4 corridor, from Orange, Osceola, and Seminole around Orlando to Polk and Hillsborough counties around Tampa. Esteban Garces is Mi Familia Vota's state director, on this day leading a registration drive at Valencia College.
The October 11th deadline is now just a few days away, so it's all gears, all systems running.
Only 74,000 votes decided Florida's 2012 presidential election. Garces says because about 500,000 eligible Latinos are not registered to vote in the state, Mi Familia Vota is in the field every day.
Our staff is very much aware that the work that we do is going to impact this election. I mean, our work is going to determine who the next president is.
Since January, Mi Familia Vota has registered more than 27,000 new Latino residents. 44-year-old Army veteran Eric Peguero embodies the ambivalence many Latinos feel toward the presidential candidates. A registered Republican who calls himself a moderate conservative, Peguero voted for Marco Rubio in the Republican presidential primary, but says that support does not extend to Donald Trump. A son of immigrants from the Dominican Republic and married to a woman from Guatemala, Peguero says immigration reform is his top concern, but he rejects Trump's call to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border and track down and deport undocumented immigrants.
I don't agree with Obamacare or anything like that, but going to the Republican nominee is ludicrous. You can't count on anything he says. One, I do believe in immigration reform, but I don't believe that we can build a wall. Two, we can't deport 11 million people, and not all of them are criminals.
Peguero says he plans to vote for Hillary Clinton because he sees her as more diplomatic and better equipped to handle the economy.
You have to see that the economy is working, and I think somebody like Hillary Clinton that's been, running for 30 years has that kind of experience and can make something happen realistically. I don't think just because you have business experience that translates into government experience. Because you don't tell the Congress what to do, you have to negotiate with the Congress to get it done.
Peguero's views are typical of Clinton's supporters and help explain why she is preferred by the majority of Florida Latinos, according to a recent Univision poll, which also found her with wider leads among Latinos in the Latino-heavy battleground states of Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada. Luis Martínez-Fernández, a Cuban immigrant who grew up in Puerto Rico, is a history professor at the University of Central Florida.
As far as a bloc, I've been saying for many years that there's no such thing. For one, a bloc is sort of solid and immovable. However, when it comes to the Hispanic vote in Florida, we see that it sways from election to election.
For decades, Cuban Americans in South Florida were the face of the state's Latino vote, and they were reliably Republican, supporting Ronald Reagan and both Presidents Bush. Yet by 2012, that had changed. Barack Obama split the Cuban vote with Mitt Romney.
So we're talking about a generation that continues to die off, and that makes them weaker in terms of their political presence.
Fernández says a younger generation of Cuban Americans and new waves of Cuban immigrants, less wedded to anti-Castro, anti-communist sentiments, has eclipsed the older generation and are increasingly supportive of Democrats. Adding to the shifts, about 1,000 Puerto Rican families, U.S. citizens with an automatic right to vote, arrive in the I-4 corridor region every month, leaving the island's economic and debt crisis that has driven the unemployment rate there to 11%. More than half of Orlando's Latino population is Puerto Rican.
If you look at all the Hispanic subgroups, the one that leans Democratic at the highest rate are Puerto Ricans.
Fernández says while immigration reform is a high priority among Latinos generally, it's less of a priority for Puerto Ricans who are U.S. citizens and Cubans whose legal residency applications are fast-tracked.
Now, that doesn't mean that they're not sensitive to these issues. That doesn't mean that we're not offended when fellow Latinos from Mexico are called a variety of names and are insulted. So it doesn't mean a lack of sensitivity. What it means is that there are different priorities.
The top priorities for Florida's Latino voters are the economy and jobs, followed by immigration, education, terrorism, and healthcare. After losing his job in Puerto Rico, 34-year-old Jezreel Zapata Moreno moved to the Orlando area in July and now works as a cashier at Kissimmee's Melao Bakery, a popular Puerto Rican restaurant.
Sadly, the situation in Puerto Rico has been very difficult, and that's why so many of us are moving here. We're in search of a place where we can prosper economically and where our kids can receive quality education.
Will you send the champion of smaller government and less spending back to Washington, D.C. by standing?
Economic prosperity and upward mobility are the talking points of the conservative Latino political group, the Libre Initiative. The group's volunteers are phone banking daily to identify and urge conservative-leaning Latinos to vote. Daniel Garza is the organization's executive director.
You have an influx of Puerto Ricans that are leaving that economic condition in Puerto Rico, not because they want to, but because they have to. What you're seeing in Puerto Rico is starting to happen here. You know, we're on an unsustainable path, on a fiscal path here that is going to ruin the next generation. It's important for us to drive that conversation within the Puerto Rican community here in Orlando because they can make a difference.
The current Republican nominee has said some pretty controversial things about immigrant communities, Latino communities.
To say the least.
Are you worried at all about what that means for conservative candidates?
Well, look, I mean, we are part of a long-term effort, and we focus on ideas, and we don't want to see, our growth rise and fall based on a personality. So we stay away, from associating to personalities, who we feel there's a lack of enthusiasm around, by the Latino voters, and we see a lack of enthusiasm around both candidates, to be honest.
President Obama carried Florida in both the last two elections. One reason, he won 57% of the state's Latino vote in 2008 and 60% in 2012. Clinton's support is not as high, around 53%, but she has a built-in advantage. 38% of Florida Latinos are registered as Democrats and 26% as Republicans. Independents are the fastest-growing contingent and make up 33%.
When we came from Puerto Rico, I did not understand the ideologies of the party. I did not understand what it meant to be a Republican or a Democrat.
Brooklyn-born and Puerto Rico raised, Bob Cortez registered as an independent when he first moved his family to Florida 27 years ago and founded a towing company and airport passenger shuttle service. He's a Republican now and the first Puerto Rican from his district to win a seat in the state legislature.
A lot of my fellow Puerto Ricans lean with the ideology Republican because many of them are fleeing the island that are $70 billion in debt with the size of government too big. The Republican Party is fiscal conservative and wants smaller government. We have, of course, the pro-life issue. I'm extremely pro-life.
Cortez believes candidates like him with socially conservative values can improve Republican standing with Latinos, who are predominantly Catholic and evangelical. As a businessman himself, Cortez also supports Trump for president.
We're talking about a lot of very important subjects, including jobs.
Whose message aligns with his own platform, promoting job creation and entrepreneurship.
When I go out to speak to somebody, whether they're Puerto Rican, Hispanic, or from South America, or Central America, or Mexican, I can relate to their stories of what brought them here because I came here 20-something years ago looking the same things that they're looking for, the American dream, and I actually can give them some insight of how I did it and where I am today. The messaging has to come from the candidate themselves to make sure that Latinos vote for candidates, not necessarily for parties, which is why we're such a swing voting group.